Okay, so obviously, so you're not supposed to know what time it is, so it's all good if nobody got it because there's nothing to
I
be
can say
gotten.
it's
Do
way
you know what I
more
mean?
modern. I wanted to kind
I
of
think
screw it up.
than everyone suspects, and there are reasons why. I mean, I wanted it to be really. I wanted it to feel off. I wanted to feel like a fairy tale almost, where it's timeless and you don't really know, and it's always like once upon a time. It's like no, when was it? But you will never know. And also because the narrator is a third person, I wanted it to feel like the narrator was maybe in humiliating Mrs. March's old-fashioned, way of life by kind of getting into that voice, of like Mrs. March went to buy flowers, and Mrs. March was just so upset. I wanted it to feel it that way when you read it, like you were laughing at her. I'm really glad that it felt off. That's exactly kind of what I was wanted to do.
So I'd never seen this painting of the, I've seen the girl with the pearl
The
earring.
famous one,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
The
But
pretty one. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I had never seen, it wasn't until I, read your thing about how she was, kind of odd looking. And I was like, really? She was beautiful. And I look it up and I was like, oh,
Right.
that,
Oh,
she looks,
that other one.
yeah, there's something
I have
very,
her here in my notes.
oh,
I have my Mrs. March cheat sheet, and just in case anybody doesn't know her, this is
right?
Kiki. This is the painting that she sees, and I mean it's a beautiful painting, but it's just very weird and off-putting, isn't it? She doesn't have any eyebrow. I don't know. It's not like the girl with the pearl earring who's like seductively like pursing her lips. I don't know. And she has a very weird smirk on her face, and her forehead is just way too high. And it's a very small painting if you see it. It's in the Met, and but the frame is golden and like very baroque and very large, and she's very small, and it's just really weird. It's very strange. So I'm really glad that you got to meet her.
These critics who were like, well, we think maybe it's because she wasn't an actual person. She was an idea of a person.
I thought
And
she was
so
the daughter. The painters. I thought she was his daughter.
I saw one thing that said that, and then
Okay,
another that said
might have made it up. Oh, that would explain. Oh, this is so interesting.
yes, and that
Like
it's different
fragments of different
pieces.
people. Oh,
Exactly.
amazing. Oh, I'd
Which
love to know
makes
that
sense with fragments, and it's not a real person, and it's a fragmented personality.
one. Oh,
And
I
then
love this. I
right,
hadn't read the theory. I thought it was, scholars were talking about how it was probably his daughter or whatever. Because I guess they're like, because he would never have painted anybody else otherwise. This, I guess. Um,
and then the other art thing that I read about it was somebody saying that they think the whole painting was an exercise in seeing beauty where there is no beauty, and accepting true flaws as beauty, and that goes back to Mrs. March because she's so like
she's so
everything must
accepting, isn't she, of her
oh,
flaws?
so accepting. She's
Yeah,
so like, let it all hang out. I'm gonna be honest and
I
not
love
care
that.
about what people think.
Mm, absolutely. But Kiki would have.
Oh
Kiki would
yeah,
have liked herself, and would have grown to be a mature adult. And but yeah, she killed her. She killed that bitch. The
exactly.
idea of her personality. And the identity, the Kiki identity is a huge. I mean, this whole book is about identity, right? So it's kind of a case study, I guess, in who Mrs. March is. It's like an exploration of who the hell this woman really is. And Kiki is a huge part of it. It could be a split personality, as you say. It could be her real personality, that the one she murdered in the bathtub. It
Mhm.
could be, because Kiki is the one who seduced this man, right, or killed him, if you will, if you
Yeah,
prefer, on the
something
beach. Yeah, but it's the conversation Mrs. March has with the man on the beach it's very out of character, I think. For
very.
March, she's being very, and she wants to be a writer, which is weird because she never, ever suggests anything like that. And then she marries a writer, which is interesting. I said of my own work, well done, Virginia. But I'm sorry, it's very pretentious. But so definitely there is something there.
So Mrs. March herself It's not until the very end that we find, like, I think it's like the last word, right? That we actually find out what her name is.
Yeah, yeah.
Why did you make that
Why
choice?
are you so weird?
I love it. It's a great choice.
Thanks. Okay, so throughout the entire book, it's Mrs. March because she's defined by her husband, and kind of reflecting back at him, kind of all of her personality traits or identity or what she thinks it should be, and it's always revolving around him. It's always his friends, it's always his dinner gatherings, it's always his thing. And it would have been her father before, and now it would be him. And the only time, like the very first time that it's, and then it was Kiki, she spoke through Kiki, and Kiki was like not quite her, but she was getting there. And then this is the only time that it's really her. This is her. That when, unfortunately, it's killing your husband, but that's the only time that it's just her, 100%.
Why is the A red? And at the time, I was like, well, first of all, I didn't even recognize that, so I was like, okay, good job. I don't know. And then somebody else was like, oh, the A is for Agatha, and I was like, oh, that makes sense, because in my head, I was like, maybe it's like the Scarlet A because she's like feels so like she feels like she's in the character of the horror.
Right. Yeah, or the rumor, yeah, the woman kind of victim of rumors. That would be amazing. I mean, we'd have to ask the amazing designer Jaya Maselli, but I did get a hint when I first saw the cover. My editor did add a line like the red A is a nod to Mrs. March's first name. And so that's a good catch. Really
Love
good
it.
catch.
Love
That.
it.
That's amazing.
Okay, so the son, what did he do to that girl? What?
Right. Right. So I know I was debating with myself, like, should I say, because I really, really wanted to make something up like that was really, really horrible. But then it was also like, I don't know, I think I was being pretentious, and like it was a nod to the turn of the screw, and you never know what Miles does in the school that gets him kicked out. And just so, but I was wrestling with myself. So I know it's sexual. So it's something sexual. I'm thinking some kind of insertion, something like that, with some sort of foreign object. I'll stop there. But yeah, something along those lines was what I was imagining. But I'd love to hear what people thought, if they
Yeah.
assumed it's sexual or not. I mean, I'm thinking he's been reading a lot of newspaper clippings about Sylvia, and all the details of how she was raped or whatever, and he kind of maybe tried to act it out in some way, or he could see his parents were both so intrigued by the story, he probably thought, there must be something to be admired in this story, so I'll just do it myself, I guess.
Yeah. Do you see Mrs. March as a villain or a victim?
Both. Both. I will take a recent movie Joker as an example. I think she's unredeemable at the end of the book. I wouldn't want to justify anything she does, because I mean, this is cold-blooded murder. Because I've had readers like, well, but yes, but he cheated on her, and I'm like, yes, however, it's different, I feel. So I think unredeemable, unjustifiable, but also she's a victim of her, upbringing, and just so much distance and coldness and abuse, and in so many little different ways, constantly throughout her life. Absolutely. But also, Jesus, what a bitch. Go get help. I mean, and actually, I put a lot of mirrors in the book and a lot of reflections constantly throughout the book. And it was kind of me trying to like make her look at herself, like, look at yourself. And she's always refusing to look at her reflection, and she's always avoiding mirrors, and then the hairdresser at the end takes her to a mirror twice, like they took her to the mirror, and that line is in there, repeatedly. And it's not bad editing. It's me like making it clear she is refusing. Like, I am giving her all this help, and she's refusing to accept it. So fuck you. So that's what you get. But also, how could she know? She's been taught to do that for her entire life. And then the only few times, going back to the conversation that she has with that man on the beach, that's the only time that she kind of maybe is a little bit more lively, and she's being a little bit more herself, and she's being a little bit more cocky. And she gets kind of like punished for it in a way. So she's like, why would she ever do it again? And so, I do feel really sorry for her, but can't. She should go to prison for sure.
Dun, dun, dun. I see the mask behind you. Is that the one that Mr. March bought for Mrs. March, or does it
Oh
have a
gosh,
different
yes.
story?
Wow, amazing catch. Daniel, this is amazing. This is the mask. This is exactly the mask. I mean,
Oh,
how freaky is this?
that is fantastic.
Whenever children come to my house, I always put this on, and their parents are like, oh no, not the mask. This is what Mrs. March wears around her apartment when she's alone. And also one of the Mrs. Marches that appear at the end is a Greek chorus. This is what she looks like.
Oh my God, I love it.
And I did kind of write this book as like a vengeance, because I have a lot of anxiety, and I have OCD, and I have purely obsessive OCD. And I think I wanted to write a book in OCD, so that, because I only just a couple of years ago realized that it's kind of hard to live in my head, mostly because people around me have been like, please stop, and get help. We don't want to live in your head. So this was like my therapy, like, well, everyone else is gonna live in my head, and it's my revenge. So welcome. This is what it's like. I wanted you to feel after a chapter like how I feel after one day of just existing.
Did she ever actually read the book, Mr. March's book?
I think she like glosses over it in that third chapter, when she's seeing things that are making her feel like it's her, and she snaps it shut, right? And then she never like really truly reads it. She's too scared to read it, I think, I'd say.
Is her increasing mania related to the root canal and possible sepsis?
Oh, interesting. I mean, I think absolutely. The dentist is the scene where she, it's like the big kaboom, and it affects her absolutely. I wasn't thinking sepsis. I was thinking more, again, this is the most boring answer ever, but it's like, it's probably a mix of, the gas that they use, and then just generally the pain, the physical trauma of it. And then what she's been taking probably reacts badly with whatever, the way the gas are at the dentist. But sepsis would be very interesting. And it is absolutely true that the dentist is what takes us to the third act. What makes her murder her husband.
That is interesting. And as I read it, I again read it in two different ways. First time I read it, when I thought of her more as a victim, I was like, oh, it brought her over the top because there's this man doing something to her that she can't really control.
And then she can't really remember it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm like, this is what, like, it's bringing all that up, and she's never been able to deal with it. And so that's what it is. And then the third time that I read it, I was like, no, I think this is just like, maybe it's just like a metaphor for the rot that she has inside of her.
That's true as well. That's true as well. And all of the imagery of like the devil getting inside, or like the rot, there's a lot of rotting things. And then in the end, when she realizes she's killed her husband, and she runs throwing up across the hall, and she goes into the guest bathroom, and she vomits black bile, which is obviously, physically impossible. But and so she feels like something dislodges like inside of her, like a stone, like she feels like a stone coming out, or something coming out of her that has been in her for a long time, and she finally throws it up. And that was all absolutely like a metaphor about the rotter, the things that are rotting inside, and that she finally gets out, which again takes us to the Agatha, which is why she's free of it now, technically, and now she'll go kill a bunch of people in prison, probably.
At the start of this book, we're not getting the full story. She is choosing to show us only certain parts of herself. She's only broadcasting one side of herself when there really is another side. There are things that she would like us to believe about her, which I think is a big reason why the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier has such a big influence at the start of this book. There are a lot of parallels between Rebecca and the early pages of Mrs. March. For example, in the way that she talks about her history with George. She talks about herself as kind of this impressionable young woman who meets this dapper gentleman about 10 years her senior who's been married before. She falls for him. In their life together at the start of this novel, they live in this Upper East Side apartment, and they have this rather forceful maid named Martha, who seems to run the show, kind of similar to Mrs. Danvers. And even Mrs. March's first name is withheld from us in the same way that the main character's from Rebecca is. And the book Rebecca even makes an appearance in the early pages of Mrs. March. Mrs. March is reading it at the start of the book, and she tells her husband that she can't pick up his newest novel and actually read through it because she can only focus on one book at a time and get all wrapped up in one book at a time. And I think that very much influences the way that she's portraying herself to us. I think she sees a lot of her life in the story of Rebecca. But as the book goes along, it becomes so obvious that that's just for show, which I guess is within character for the appearances-obsessed Mrs. March. She would like us to believe that she has so much in common with the innocent, almost blank slate main character of Rebecca, when really the language that she uses to describe things going on around her, people around her, she reveals herself to be judgmental, self-serving, and more than a little neurotic. There's this vein of narcissism in her. So one of my only frustrations with the reading experience of this book is that I kept on hoping there would be more excerpts from his novel, which is a book we don't even learn the title of. I was hoping there would be snippets of it so I could answer for myself whether or not he based this character off of his wife. But as much as it frustrated me as a reader, as much as that was a frustration, I understand why she made that choice as an author. I do think that including more excerpts from George's book probably would have taken some of the mystery away, and it also probably would have pulled us out of this parallel reality that Mrs. March seems to live in, this world inside her own head that we disturbingly get to inhabit for 300 pages. So reading this book is kind of like being inside of a fever dream. She is our narrator. So reading this book, seeing things with her eyes, is like looking out at the world with your eyes glazed over. The images may be blurry, but she's who we have to tell this story. So we know that the images aren't trustworthy, but there's a part of them that we just have to believe if we're going to keep going. This is a deeply psychological book, and not just because it's technically about a woman who is losing her mind, but also because Virginia Feito makes it a priority to show you how this woman came to be the way that she is. This book is so unsettling, and although it's rather slow in pace for the majority of it, it's so high tension that it'll just make your hairs stand on end. My heart was pounding every single time I picked up this book. It's honestly more impressive to me that this author managed to create this building sense of dread using very little action. Instead, she gives us this escalating sense that this character is becoming more and more unhinged, and simultaneously, she's not gaining any self-awareness. She doesn't know how much she's disconnecting from reality. So you know it's not going to end well.